Hey y'all, I'm Cincy Fringe producer Katie Hartman, and this is the moment we've all been waiting for, the 2023 Cincinnati Fringe Festival primary lineup. From hometown hero and returning artist Boris Dansbury, now hailing from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, comes Cry Wulf, heroism, blood, absolute evil, puppets. What's more manly than that? Cry Wulf forges a trans identity in a Western society caught in the claws of toxic masculinity. Experience Beowulf, viewed by those reaffirming their manhood from the outside in. Next up is Anchorette, from first-time Cincy Fringe producer Jane Carver out of Cincinnati, Ohio. An abandoned baby, a ship's crew, and an ancient superstition. Anchorette is a poetic tale of seafaring with musical interludes for voice and concertina. From first-time Cincy Fringe producers Nora Bonner and James Cargill out of Atlanta, Georgia and Detroit, Michigan comes One Last Night with Mary MacLane. Come bear witness to this 19th century genius's last gig before she meets the devil. One Last Night with Mary MacLane is a ferocious, hilarious, and Faustian rock musical self-tribute. From returning local artist and multi-award-winning Cincy Fringe producer Hannah Gregory comes a comedy, The Highwaywoman. When noblewoman Catherine Ferrers loses everything to the English Civil War, she and her best friend Cordelia take matters into their own hands. This is the origin story of the wicked Lady Ferrers, famed Renaissance highwaywoman, directed by A.J. Baldwin. Cincy Fringe producers Clifton Players return for their 9th production at the Cincinnati Fringe with The Rembrandt Job, the historically accurate and hysterically funny tale of a real botched robbery of Rembrandt paintings from the Taft Museum in 1973. From recent CCM graduate and the creator of last year's Sally Salem and the Spooktacular Birthday Extravaganza, Zoe Peterson presents To Spite One's Face, a show about sisterhood, poltergeists, and grief. If the VHS from The Ring met The Women of Glow, it's campy horror with a bleeding heart. From first-time Cincy Fringe producer Maya Morgan Aovel comes Totola. Totola, the Cherokee word for mountains, is a poetic and cyclical performance piece that pieces together what it means to be a Cherokee descendant while weaving through cultural diaspora, assimilation, and identity from an indigenous perspective. From the Bronx, New York comes touring solo artist and first-time Cincy Fringe producer Mary Goggin with her award-winning true story, Runaway Princess, a hopeful tale of heroine, hooking, and happiness. Told with dark humor and unflinching honesty, come see what audiences and critics alike at last year's Edinburgh Fringe Festival hailed as completely extraordinary. From returning Cincy Fringe producers Solasta Theater Lab out of Cincinnati, Ohio, comes Modern Beings in Search of the Soul. How do we find our footing in a world that rocks at every turn? To heal or to heal? That is the question. A brand new, full sensory, kinesthetic creation from the co-creators of last year's A Morgue of the Forgotten. 5-time Cincy Fringe producers and winner of the 2021 Artist's Pick of the Fringe, In Boca performance out of Cincinnati, Ohio, returns with Rappings. In mid-19th century upstate New York, the Fox sisters gained fame for their unearthly abilities to contact and commune with the dead. But was it all a hoax, or was it something darker, more sinister, and all too real? Straight from critically acclaimed runs at the Hollywood Fringe Festival and at New York's Soho Playhouse comes first-time Cincy Fringe producer Teruko Nakajima with her one-woman show, Made in America. Teruko Nakajima is an actor, dancer, singer, writer, woman, Asian, first-generation immigrant, and American who was born into a family of artists in Tokyo, Japan, but now hails from Los Angeles, California. Made in America is a brutally honest, surprisingly entertaining, and heartbreakingly life-affirming love letter to the human experience. It's a story for women, Asians, first-generation immigrants, and anyone who is fighting to make their dreams come true. Her dog TT performs too. From first-time Cincy Fringe producer Sound Body Culture out of Cleveland, Ohio, comes Sin of Omission, a light-hearted neo-noir murder mystery with original music. The city, Cleveland. The year, 1950. Cynthia Richards is a detective on a provisional basis. Her first day on the job, she uncovers a string of seemingly unrelated crimes. A series of rousing musical numbers, running gags, and thought-provoking situations follow Cynthia as she finds herself an unwitting pawn in a larger conspiracy. Following a successful run at last year's Minnesota Fringe Festival, first-time Cincy Fringe producers, Clever Name Theater from St. Paul, Minnesota, present Who's Afraid of Winnie the Pooh? Winnie and Piglet invite the new couple over for drinks. A night of bitter, sadomasochistic mind games ensues. Witness the dramatic triumph of the year, nestled in the unassuming heart of the 100-acre wood. It's Edward Albee, but Winnie the Pooh. Following a sold-out run at last year's Cincy Fringe, local theater lovelies Queen City Flash return for their 10th production at this year's Cincinnati Fringe, with Ruh-roh, the epic conclusion to Queen City Flash's award-winning Zoinks trilogy. Perfect for both newcomers and returning fans alike, Ruh-roh follows the adventures of teen detective Nolan Blackwell and her dog Casper, and is a foul-mouthed and irreverent send-up of Nancy Drew and Scooby-Doo. Originally from Cincinnati, first-time Cincy Fringe producer Linnea Bond is a Philadelphia-based actor, writer, and director whose work explores individual, communal, and global apocalypse, often centering environmental activism and eco-grief. Heart Ripped Out Twice and So Can You is part clown comedy, part timeshare pitch, part pity party, part existential howl. It's a mostly comedy about pain. First-time Cincy Fringe producer Paris Creighton III is a Los Angeles-based, award-winning playwright, actor, and director. When his one-man show, Bloodline, made its world premiere earlier this year at the Orlando Winter Mini Fest, it dazzled both audiences and critics alike, who praised it for its carefully crafted prose, both achingly poetic and authentically raw. Bloodline is the one-man, semi-autobiographical love story told from the perspectives of 3 generations of men with the same name. Winner of both a Critics' Choice Award and a staff pick at the Orlando Winter Mini Fest, Bloodline is a story for anyone who has loved or wants to be loved. Returning Cincy Fringe producer Dawn Larson hails from Florence, South Carolina, where she is a storyteller, singer-songwriter, actor, and director. Last seen at the Cincy Fringe in 2019 with The Vicious Hillbilly. Now she presents Granny's Fix-It, an Ozark's guide to healing the body and soul. The traditional healers of Appalachia, Granny women were there to minister to their communities when doctors and hope weren't. Let Granny fix it. Come get a cure. First-time Cincy Fringe producers Megan Flynn and Teresa Vandenen Soga are professional dance artists, educators, and longtime collaborators based in Troy, New York, Philadelphia, and Cincinnati. Mothering and Mourning is an evening of experimental dance dedicated to the absurdity of caregiving and the mother-like folks unfazed by the mess, sandwiched in the complexity between caring for aging parents and young children, harvesting eggs due to a cancer diagnosis, and birthing creative ideas without an epidural. Mothering and Mourning, because aren't we all? They may be first-time Cincy Fringe producers, but patrons are certain to recognize the sheer creative force behind Doin' Too Much Productions, the creators of Gentrification, the musical. With book and music by Dan Zimmer and directed by Tatiana Godfrey, this 2-person musical starring Brantley Goodrich and Aiden Sims is definitely not about OTR or 3CDC. Based out of Chicago, returning Cincy Fringe producer John Michael is an award-winning international performance artist trauma clown. He creates interactive comedies about tough-to-talk-about topics that use audience participation to create a party vibe full of beautiful calamity. Spank Bank Time Machine is a gay, interactive comedy about best friends, poppers, douches, grief, and 50% off Andrew Christian underwear. Orlando Weekly described it as a wacky, campy romp through grief. Returning for their 12th Cincinnati Fringe Festival production, Pones is a Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky-based movement company. Keeping Our Torch is a dance-infused performance highlighting aging community members' diverse stories of wisdom and joy throughout life. This collaborative project is inspired by real-life stories from community elders on the formative milestones of their lives, the wisdom that they've gained and would like to pass along, and their hopes for intergenerational joy. What does it look like to keep the creative torch lit throughout life? Prolific storyteller and comedian John Bennett made his Cincy Fringe debut at last year's festival with Fire in the Meth Lab, and this year he's back with John Bennett, Dad Hates Jokes. From Adelaide, Australia, this is the story of the strange relationship between a comedian and his extremely conservative father, a man who has died more than once. Dating when you're old is very hard. Dating when you're transgender is even harder. Dating when you're old and transgender? Welcome to the Schmilf life. Rochester, New York-based storyteller and returning Cincy Fringe producer Penny Sterling takes you on a poignant and hilarious journey as she tries to find a relationship while learning to live her authentic life. Penny was last at the Cincinnati Fringe in 2017 with her show Spy in the House of Men, which was selected as a Critic's Choice by Cincinnati City Beat. Returning to Cincy Fringe with a brand new collection of hilarious, heartfelt stories and songs. The multi-award-winning professional storyteller and Covington, Kentucky-based theater artist Paul Strickland is back with Once Upon a Lie, Paul Strickland. Making their Cincy Fringe debut, producer Amika Hunter is a multidisciplinary artist based in Portland, Oregon. For the last decade, they have been creating, performing, producing, and touring internationally as half of the 20-time award-winning comedy duo A Little Bit Off. Anatomica is the hilarious, captivating, and sometimes unsettling solo comedy about the chaos of the natural world and the horror of living in a body. Part storytelling, part stand-up, part clown, and 100% organic, baby. First-time Cincy Fringe producers Coyote & Co. Creative Studios present Julie, the sapphic, picaresque journey of a badass, 17th century, bisexual, gender-bending, sword-wielding woman, the life and times of Julie d'Aubigny. Helmed by Lisa DeRoberts and based in Cincinnati, Coyote & Co. Creative Studios tells the stories of people who live their truth and swim against the cultural current. Based in Tokyo, Japan, returning Cincy Fringe producer Yanomi Shoshins is one of the most renowned comedy acts in Japan, regularly performing in Tokyo, North America, and all around the world. Yanomi Shoshins first came to Cincinnati Fringe Festival in 2015 with her brilliant physical theater and puppet piece, Kiss Around, Pass Around. Yanomi returns with Happy Go Lucky, an all-new one-woman show of extraordinary storytelling and unique puppetry that is certain to delight audiences of all ages. First-time Cincy Fringe producer and Los Angeles-based production designer and professional magician Liz Tunkel presents Magic for Animals, a one-woman magic show about agency, consent, and animal rights, using sparkling, incisive humor to offer an antidote to the gendered and speciesist history of magic. It examines how we treat animals and urges the audience to reconsider how we treat one another. From first-time Cincy Fringe producer Lisa Egan Woods of Versailles, Kentucky, comes Thread and Bone. In this intimate patchwork of love, family, grief, and heart surgery survival, one woman and her sewing machine will tear apart and restitch a dress in less than an hour in this sometimes funny, always honest solo work that is part memoir, part eulogy, and part dressmaking project. From local returning Cincy Fringe producer, The Pajama Playhouse, comes UDFCC, Unambiguously Destructive Family Crushes Community. In this political and experimental play with puppets, local playwright R. Graham Rogers invites you to find out what happens when two Carls, Barry Larkin, and a banana take a stroll down Central. And finally, celebrating 20 years of the Cincinnati Fringe Festival, returning festival producer Performance Gallery returns for their 20th performance, presenting Plosive, a Cincinnati-based collaborative of artists existing to produce and promote challenging works of theater. Performance Gallery creates works that are outlandish, profound, and always unpredictable. And this year is no different. With Plosive, they aim to deftly dissect and reorganize the sound mechanics of human speech, vocal sounds giving new context to conventional language. And that's it, my friends. The 31 shows in the primary lineup of the 20th annual Cincy Fringe Festival, taking place June 2nd through the 17th in beautiful Over-the-Rhine, Cincinnati. Flex and all-access passes are available now at cincyfringe.com, and the full schedule announcement and single tickets go on sale on April 24th. Stay tuned, as there's more Cincy Fringe where that came from, as we announce Cincy Fringe development, special events, and the primary digital lineup. Thanks, y'all. We can't wait to see you on June 2nd at the Cincy Fringe Festival kickoff, when we celebrate 20 years of experimental performance.